Hi everyone, Tiffany here with a new cosplay tutorial, and this one is over how I made my wig for my Blair cosplay from the anime Soul Eater. As always, here is the reference image for Blair. I first bought my base wig, which is the classic purple mix from Epic Cosplay Wigs. I then separated the wig into 4 sections, one for all of the bangs, one for each of the spirals, and also the back hair. And we're going to talk about how I did the back hair first. I then started at the very bottom left, first combing it, and then straightened it with the lowest heat setting on the straightener. I then used scissors and cut the hair so it was around 2 to 3 inches long. Very important, keep every single hair piece that you cut, including all of the extra little sheddings. They will come in handy throughout the whole entire project. I then used thinning shears to thin the hair out on the back and make it more of a kind of triangle look to the center. And after that first weft was done, I repeated the same process, moving one weft at a time, going up the back of the head. I also used Got2b hairspray throughout the process, so that way I could lock the hair down. When I was around halfway up the hair on the back of the head, I then made each of my cuts longer. So at this point, my hair length was around 5 inches. And for the very top of the head, I made the hair length around 7 inches using a thinning shear to make sure that it was kind of layered and didn't look like a straight line. And once my hair was the length that I wanted and it was all floofed up, I then used some more hairspray, followed by a hairdryer, and moved the hairdryer going from the scalp down to the base of the hair, and this made the hair smooth and lay flat around the head. Now to continue around the head, let's next talk how I did some of the bangs to frame the face. I first used a straightener on the lowest heat setting, and then I held with my hand the bottom of the hair so that way it would be straight and would not go fluff on me. I then used scissors and cut at a 45 direction going downward, followed by a pair of thinning shears to help make it a little less straight. And now for the main bangs. Of course, I had to straighten all the hair again. I then sectioned the hair into the 2 very long bangs on the sides, and then the rest of the shorter bangs in the center. And next, I thinned out the long bangs using thinning shears, so that way they were both even on the same side and looked more natural. Then I used Got2b hairspray, followed by a hairdryer while the hairspray was still wet, and went from the top of the head down to the bottom of the hair in an even direction, so that way it would kind of lock in place and be more of one stiff piece of hair. To hold the tips of the hair together, I used Got2b Ultra Glued Invincible Styling Gel, and I used a blow dryer and held it in place so that way it would stay pointed. I repeated the same process for the other side. Now to talk about the short bangs. I splitted the short bangs into 2 sections, and then for the smaller pair of bangs, I used thinning shears and cut shorter into more of a point at the end. And then I used the styling gel, covered it on the short bangs, used a hairdryer, and then held in place to a point. And for the larger section of the shorter bangs, I released the hair, used hairspray first, followed by a hairdryer to kind of help hold the direction that I wanted them to face. Used thinning shears again to make more of a triangle look to the bangs and cut them shorter. And then once again, I used the styling gel all over the bangs and followed by a hairdryer. And to make the hair points even more pointier, I again used the styling gel, but at the bottom, I ended up twisting it just slightly and then locking it in place with a blow dryer. And this helped to keep it, since it's going to be moving on your nose back and forth and it will probably become loose, but this helps hold it in place. Now to talk about how I made the hair spirals. I first printed off a picture of Blair's hair spiral to a relatively size that I wanted, and then I used a wire and bent it to the shape that I wanted. And you can get wires like this in the floral department of Hobby Lobby or any craft store. I then cut out 2 strips of 2mm EVA foam the length of the spiral, applied contact cement glue to the entire surface, and let dry. And then once dry, I sandwiched the wire in between the EVA foam. This will give your hair a surface to attach to. I then used hot glue in small sections at a time, working on one side of the spiral before turning to the other, and covering it with all of the random scraps of hair. I did this until the entire spiral was covered on both sides. I then sprayed the entire piece with Got2b hairspray and let dry, and then used scissors to trim it down so it wasn't so fluffy. I then covered the entire spiral with the invisible styling gel, and starting from the very center of the spiral working to the outer part, I used the long pieces of hair scraps laying down in the same direction, making sure to use a hairdryer to help lock it in place and dry it as you go along. And here's what it looks like after the entire piece was covered with the nice long pieces of hair. To help hold the spiral from moving around too much or like flopping forward, I used a piece of fishing wire to tie the center part of the spiral to the outer part, and this will help hold it together. I then split the section I had for the spiral hair in half in the center, and I used hot glue to glue the spiral to one of the bands for the cap. And to help hold it together even more, I used some leather thread and sewed it to the wig. Next, I used Got2b hairspray and sprayed a lot onto the spiral and onto the extra hair and laid it around the bottom half, slowly working from the top part of the spiral working towards the center, and also using a hairdryer to help hold it in place and go in the direction of the spiral that I wanted it to. I repeated the same process to cover the top half of the spiral, followed by a lot of hairspray and some more hairdryer to help hold and lock all of the hair in place. And here's what it looks like once that one side is done. I then repeated the same process to attach the other spiral to the wig. Now to talk about how I made the little kitty ears. I traced and cut out my kitty ear shape onto 8mm EVA foam and used contact cement glue to glue the two pieces together. In working on the very center of the ear first, I covered it in Sobo glue using a stick and then used the shredding hair and covered the center, followed by hairspray to help hold and lock it in place. I did the same process for the back of the ear and then used scissors to kind of trim it, followed by the sides and then the rest of the front. And once all of the ear was dry, I then covered it in our styling gel and then put strips of our nice long hair down in the same direction. You can see here the before and after of the back side of the ear. I repeated this process until the whole ear was covered and then used hairspray followed by a hairdryer to help hold and lock it in place. And then I used scissors to trim all of the extra floof hair. To give the ears a little bit more depth, I painted the center part with black heavy body acrylic paint and painted the tips of the ear a lavender-like color. And to attach the ear to the wig head, applied hot glue to the bottom of the ear and then held in place on the wig until it was dry. I then went in with some more black acrylic paint and painted some of the root sections and gave a little bit more depth to the wig. And that is how I made my wig for my Blair cosplay from the anime Soul Eater.